once again, I am Dima Jackson, teacher history, Namgongo Secondary and Vocational School. In our previous sharing, we were looking at the foreign policy of Louis Philippe. And among the few features we had shared, we had already shared around 3. And one was the Belgian Revolution of 1830. We said in that event, Louis Philippe was a disappointment to the Frenchmen. And 2, we said that there was the Italian Revolution, 1830. And still we said that even in that event, this gentleman was a disappointment to the Frenchmen. And 3, we said 1830 revolution in Poland, still this gentleman registered a disappointment to the Frenchmen. Today, we want now to look at the remaining features of Louis Philippe's foreign policy. And this means we are now looking at feature number 4. Feature number 4 in his foreign policy came in 1840. And this was the Syrian Question. Syrian Question was an event that had its background in the Greek War of Independence of 1821 to 39. In this Greek War of Independence, Greece was fighting to attain her independence from Turkey. And we all know that at that time, Turkey was regarded as the sick man of Europe. So in that war, the sick man of Europe had to look for all possible means of attaining assistance from other powers. On the other hand, even Greece was also seeking for help from other European countries. It happened that one of the countries that was to give help to our sick man Turkey was Egypt. This Egypt of Africa, one could be thinking of Egypt that maybe we have another Egypt elsewhere. No, Egypt of Africa, North Africa. So Egypt, under the leadership of Mehmet Ali, at times some of you call him Muhammad Ali, Mehmet Ali gave assistance to Turkey. But this assistance was attached with conditions. Egypt was to be rewarded with the money, Syrian, great. Now, it was unfortunate that in this war, although Egypt was promised these territories, the truth is Greece attained assistance from other countries, and Greece ended up being stronger than the sick man of Europe and the company. So eventually, our leader, our gentleman, Mehmet Ali of Egypt, was not given assistance, was not given the promise, simply because they were defeated. And so it is this that forced Mehmet Ali to attack Syria as a way of rewarding himself. So in attacking Syria, that is where our leader of France, Louis Philippe, was weighed. Mehmet Ali sought for the assistance of Louis Philippe, such that Mehmet Ali would take up Syria. To the Frenchmen, this was a great opportunity for especially the glory seekers. Unfortunately, this gentleman went, tried to give some kind of help, but Eventually, in 1841, a meeting was called, London Conference was convened. And in this London Conference, France was not even invited. The failure to invite France meant Louis Philippe to panic, and eventually Louis Philippe withdrew from this project. According to the Frenchmen, they wanted their leader to help Egypt flee, take up Syria, and when they take up Syria, France would eventually throw Egypt out of Syria, and Syria would remain under the control of France. That was what the French wanted. But unfortunately, the coward didn't take up the project, and eventually it became a disappointment to the Frenchmen. The fifth event that we can venture into is the French imperialistic design over the Tahiti Island. Tahiti Island is one of the islands that is near South America. So French troops were sent to colonize the Tahiti Island. And eventually, at the initial stages, it was a successful event that the French took over the Tahiti Island. Unfortunately, when you look at South America, the British were still there in South America, having a lot of interest in South America, and therefore it was a British area of interest. When the British realized that France had taken over the Tahiti Island, Britain was disappointed, and they really pestered our gentleman Louis Philippe to withdraw his troops, because Britain had interest in South America. Eventually, because Louis Philippe did not want to fight Britain at any single time, Louis Philippe withdrew from that project. This was a disappointment to the glory seekers of France, who wanted a leader to the standards of Napoleon Bonaparte, who could wage war on certain territories, bring those territories under the control of France, and hence a French empire. This one, instead of bringing other places under the control of France, he was instead withdrawing. This is what the Frenchmen believed was a total disappointment. And that's why one asked that, what have the Orleans done anyway for France? And the answer was, nothing, nothing, and indeed nothing. Simply because he was just a disappointment to the Frenchmen. Where they expected him to act, where they expected him to please the French masses, he did not please the masses. And therefore, he takes up the title of a coward king. The other event, number 6, that we can look at is the French control of Algeria. This was yet another very vital event in the foreign policy of Louis Philippe. Algeria was one of the territories that had been brought under the control of France by Charles X. So Charles X identified this territory and sent troops, and by 1830, this territory was under the control of France and was having many Frenchmen. Around the tune of 20,000 Frenchmen were already in Algeria. He started by conquering it from the coast, but as time went on, the whole of Algeria was under the control of France, and actually that marked the beginning of the French occupation of West Africa. But this gentleman, when he came to power in 1830, some Frenchmen pressurized him to withdraw from Algeria. This time, he stood firm and he did not withdraw from Algeria. Instead, he sent even more French troops to Algeria and brought the whole of Algeria under the control of France. Actually, by around 1840, over 100,000 Frenchmen were in Algeria. This was a great achievement to him. Although at times, when people have hated you and when people do not see your value, even when you register something good, that good thing may not be noticed by others. But at least we are noticing is a serious event of completing the project that had been initiated by Charles X, who had to exit power in 1830. The next event is the Swiss Civil War of 1848. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a very serious event. The Swiss Civil War. In this war, this war was in Switzerland, and it was between the Protestants and the Catholics in Switzerland. A civil war. Now, the Protestants in Switzerland called for help from Britain. The Protestants called for help from Britain. And indeed, Britain responded very fast, came and gave assistance to their fellow Protestants. Now, on the other hand, we had the Catholics. With the Catholics, for them, they had to call for the help from France. And in France, this is ideally our gentleman, Louis Philippe. Britain marched very fast under the leadership of Palmerston. He did things diplomatically and swiftly. Now, our gentleman, Louis Philippe, who was always there to dance according to the tune of the British, he feared to go and help the fellow Catholics. And eventually, the Catholics in Switzerland were defeated by the Protestants. The French Catholics believed this was a betrayal of the fellow Catholics in Switzerland. Would they betray them? And therefore, this was a disappointment to the Frenchmen, because the Frenchmen wanted the very way the Protestants were helped by the British. They also wanted to help the fellow Catholics in Switzerland. That defeat became a serious stumbling block in the reign of Louis Philippe, and therefore a disappointment to the Frenchmen. And the other event that we need to also understand at such a time is the Spanish royal marriage of 1846. Now, this was one of the events where Louis Philippe tried to stand his ground. There were two princesses for the royal, in the royal family of Spain, and these ones were Infanta and Isabel. The two were not married. And the two countries showed the interest in supplying or in providing husbands, royal husbands, to these two girls, Infanta and Isabella. France was to provide a husband to Infanta, who was the younger sister. And then Britain was to provide a husband to Isabella, who was the elder sister. Unfortunately, fortunately, this event was given to Louis Philippe to manage. He was the one to lead the functions and the arrangements in seeing that the two girls are married off. The reason as to why France and Britain were interested in providing husbands is simply because at some time France or Britain would be the rightful leaders of the Spanish throne. That's why they were interested in supplying husbands. So, Britain proposed a German prince, and France proposed Louis Philippe's son. Now, since Isabella was the elder sister, Isabella was to get married first, and after getting married, she had to bear children, and after bearing children, that is when Infanta could also go. Unfortunately, a rumor emerged that the husband or the man who was to take Isabella, the elder sister, the German prince, was impotent, and therefore he could not bear a child. And yet the condition was Infanta could only go for marriage after the elder sister had children. Now, our gentleman this time is appreciated that he took a firm stand and they decided to organize the marriage of the two girls on the same day. And that was on the 10th of October 1846. The two girls were married off. Infanta went to France and Isabella went to Britain. And this was a great credit to the gentleman, especially from the glory seekers of France. They really appreciated him for taking a firm stand. However, it was a disappointment also to another group, especially the diplomats and the middle class, which had supported him in power. Why? He cut off diplomatic relations with Britain. Britain, the country that he did not want to go into loggerheads with, had to cut off the trade relations because Britain was disappointed with the step that Louis Philippe took. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are some of the key features of Louis Philippe's foreign policy. When you look at his foreign policies, no wonder, most of them connect to his downfall. Actually, when you look at most of the features that we have just mentioned, they all contributed towards his unpopularity and eventually his downfall in 1848. So thank you for listening. Keep checking on our YouTube. You will get a lot of information on our YouTube, that is Nakongo Secondary and Vocational School. I remain Dima Jackson, your teacher for European history. Thank you.